one of the ways that I was able to move forward and build resiliency, obviously, that act of leaving was a stepping stone. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it was such a powerful stepping stone for me. It was my foundation of building my resiliency when I made that effort to run away.
As you know, we use this platform to share stories of resilience. And today I have a very special guest.
It's your host, Sally Ellen, again for the Sally Ellen podcast. I'm so glad you're here today listening to this episode because it's a really special episode and it's a solo. I've done one solo, but this solo is quite different. Normally, when I share my story, I would share it via interview style, but today I'm actually going to tell my story. I don't know if you've seen my book, Triumph Over Failure and Fear. I'll probably go a little bit into the book and tell my story. I think sometimes one of the things we tend to do is we like to compare ourselves to other people. I've heard people say, well, Sally, my story isn't as powerful as yours, so I don't have a story to tell. And trust me, that is not true. We all have a story to tell and a story to share. Somebody needs to hear what you've been through and how you got out on the other end. And it doesn't matter how small it is or how big it is. Your story is uniquely, precisely made for you and made for you to use it to inspire other people. So with that, I'm going to go into my story. So my first memory was being dropped off at kindergarten and I wasn't picked up. So I remember that day specifically when my mother took me to kindergarten. It was raining and it rained all day. And at the end of the day, I remember waiting for her to pick me up, and she did not come to pick me up. Now, in my country, we don't have school buses. It's a third world poor country. We wait for our parents to get us. The teacher leaves. I mean, it's very loosey-goosey. So I waited, and I don't know how long I waited, but when she didn't show up, I decided to find my way home. I learned that day that I find directions through landmarks. Some people do street signs. I do landmarks. And I saw my first landmark, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting there. I kept walking, and then I came to my second landmark, which was a bridge that we had crossed when we went to school, and she took me to school that day. And as I stood there staring at the bridge, I couldn't believe my eyes. The water because it was raining so much, the water just rose up to the top of the bridge, and all of the loose planks on the bridge just had floated away, and there were large gaps in the bridge. And as I looked at it, and as there's thunder and lightning, and I heard screaming. I'm just, who is screaming? And I realized it was me. I was screaming. I couldn't swim. I was terrified. I was so terrified. But I realized then at that age, I was tenacious. I decided I was going to get across that bridge because I needed to get home. So I got down on my belly and I crawled. I crawled, and when I got to a gap, I would stretch my hand over and I would pull myself across. But when I got to the last gap, I kind of misjudged that gap, and half of my body fell in the water, the raging waters. And again, the screaming, I thought I was going to die, but somehow, by sheer miracle, I pulled myself up. And I got up and I ran across the bridge. I rolled down the embankment and just lay there with mud on my face, the rain just washing it off. And I knew at 6 years old, this realization came to me. I knew why my mom didn't pick me up. See, she was an alcoholic, and I knew where she was exactly, which bar she was at. And I was always the one bringing her home. And I knew my job then was to take care of her. There was no one taking care of me. It was my job to take care of her. So with that, I did that for 2-3 more years. I knew I took care of my mom. I don't know if you've heard Ed Milet's story, but it's really powerful. He talked about his father who was an alcoholic. And one of the things he said is you learn how to read people when they're alcoholics because you need to know how to gauge their mood and you need to know how to deal with them. And I learned that so well. I learned how to gauge her mood. I learned how to kind of trick her into going home, how to, how to challenge her. Like, you can't walk up the stairs or you can't do this. I learned that. But by the time I was 8 or 8 and a half, I was just tired of it. I didn't want to take care of her anymore. It was just tiresome all the time trying to come up with different ways to get her to come home from the bars. So I had heard this story. I'd heard of someone going to sleep forever. Now, I didn't know what that was back then, but it was someone who had taken a lot of pills and they died. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I go to sleep and I don't wake up? So I hunted around the house and I found all the pills I could. And I took 50 pills. I count them out. Now, I obviously didn't die, but I hallucinated so badly and I was so sick for 3 days. Here is the lesson that taught me. No one cared that I was sick for 3 days. We had some other family members living in the house with my mother and no one cared. And I realized that made me want to go to sleep even more. My mom would come home, she'd go to sleep, and then she goes back out and she does her thing. So I decided the following week, I am going to try this again. I'm going to do a second attempt, but I'm going to take more pills. And I'm lying, as I'm sitting there on the bed, counting out these pills, there was a knock on the door. And I went to the door to see who it was. Now, I grew up in Guyana, South America. And we don't see Caucasians in South America, right? We're all just seeing me. I am brown and short. I'm barely 4 foot tall, a little bit more. So we don't see 6 feet, white, pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. I've never seen anyone like that. Red checker shirt, red bike, I remember specifically. And he came to the gate and he said, "Come here, little girl." And I was very fascinated by him, especially his red bike. And I walked up and he said, "Do you know who Jesus is?" And "No, I grew up in a Muslim home." "No." And he gave me a little red book and he said, "Jesus loves you." Now, I had 4 books I would read over and over again. I was an avid reader. And I took this book and I ran upstairs, this beautiful red leather bound with gold binding. It was just beautiful. And I sat with it and I tried to read it. Now, I don't know if you've ever read the Bible. It's really hard to understand as a believer. So just think about a little girl trying to go through this. But I got to the part where Jesus walked on water. And it was so fascinating to me. 2 things resonated with me that day. This dude walked on water. And secondly, he loves me. I've never heard the term love referring to me. And that really warmed my heart. So I sat there and I started sharing with my new friend, my imaginary friend, everything I was going through. And I don't know how long I was sharing, but I was just crying and sharing. And it almost felt like a purge. And as I fell asleep when I was finished, and when I woke up, for some reason, I did not have the urge to take my life. It was almost like I had hope. Now, hope comes in different forms. And sometimes for me, it came through this imaginary friend that I will tell you how I got to know better later. But hope comes, it could be a friend, it could be a mentor, it could be people we talk to. It just comes in different forms. And I was grateful my hope came in that form. So fast forward, I'm 12 years old, a mom died. And it was very traumatic because she died in my arms. We were sleeping I used to sleep with my mom, sleeping one night, and I can feel her shaking me awake. And I thought maybe she's sick. So I kind of held her in my arms and she passed and I didn't know. I fell asleep. And when I woke up, it's like, oh my gosh, she had passed in my arms. So After mom passed, I lived with these other family members who will remain unnamed in the house, and 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 that was jumping from from the frying pan into the fire. It was a whole another set of abuse that I went through. Just think about the Cinderella story, and even worse than that. But it gets worse because when I turned, I think it was 15 or 16, the son of these family members I was living with, he just became a pervert. He started touching me in my sleep. He would come to my room and touch me in my sleep, and he would poke holes in the wall and peek at me when I'm getting dressed. And it was just another terror, another set of terror that I endured for a couple of years. Hiding from him, sleeping in the closet, sleeping under the bed, sleeping where he can't see me, hardly sleeping, sitting up because I was afraid he'll come and touch me. So I went through that for a few years, and I tried to tell what I was going through, and nobody believed me. They said I was making up stories. Within that time, another family friend abused me sexually also, and I was afraid to tell because no one believed me the first time. So that's trauma that I carried, and it was so hard to carry that trauma that right about that age I started to suffer with low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, and trauma that built up, and I constantly make up stories in my head. Now, no, I had my imaginary friend I was talking to, but I had no other support. Now, I want to preface this. I do have other siblings, and I am intentionally leaving them out of my story because this is my story, and I don't want to drag them into it. So I realized something though. We're only as sick as our secrets. When we hold secrets, trauma literally takes hold of our bodies, and it creates all sorts of issues and sickness. And I was always so unhappy. I was always so sad. I couldn't understand what I was feeling and why I was feeling this because there was no one to talk to. There was no way I know how to deal with my trauma. And all I did was make up all these stories in my head. So I usually tell people, you don't have to be behind bars literally to live in a prison. You could live in a prison in your own mind. And that is the worst prison you can live in. And if you don't know how to get out of it, it's just the worst thing that could happen to you. So, 17, the day I got out of high school. Now this is how it works in my country. We're not allowed to date. We're not allowed to, even in class. When we were in class, I was in high school. We sit separately from the boys. We can't. We don't know how to interact with males, and we are not allowed to date. So, but I came home that day and I was told that I was getting married. It was my last day of high school. And there was a man there, and he was 10 years older than me. Now I was 17 and a half. And I knew this is a common thing in my country where they do these arranged marriages. But for me, I knew why it was happening. It wasn't in my best interest. It was because I was a burden to these people, family members I was living with, and it was their way of getting rid of me. And that was solidified when I found let me say. I got married 3 days later, by the way. 3 days later, I got married to this man I did not know. And my suspicion of them giving me away was solidified by knowing this man was completely illiterate. He was a drunk and he was an abuser. So for 3 years, I lived in my country until he sponsored me and brought me to America. And the abuse continued with him for 3 years. So I came to America thinking, hey, it's the land of opportunity. You know, we saw America on TV, and you have this ideal image in your head about what you think things should look like and how it is. And I came here, and I'm thinking he said, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to college when you get here. You won't have to work, and I'm going to take care of you. And he's telling me all these things. And I'm begging my family, don't send me with him. He tried to kill me several times already. And they're like, what are you going to do? You have to go. We don't get divorced. We don't leave our husbands. This is what we do. And here's the kicker, who's going to want you? Because you're no longer a virgin. Somebody actually told me that. And me, not knowing any better, believed all of this. So I came to America thinking, okay, perhaps it will be different. I got here, went Brooklyn. We lived in Brooklyn, New York, the worst part of Brooklyn. I got to this house with 14 family members. And it's the same culture as my culture, where everybody gets in your business. They tell you what to do. I mean, it was so bad. But on the first night, I got here. We got into the room, and he grabbed me by the throat. And I was 87 pounds, right? He grabbed me by the throat, and he held me up on the wall and said, if you try to run away, if you try to defy me, and if you try to even use birth control or do anything I didn't tell you to do, I will nail you like they nailed Jesus Christ on the wall. And I knew this was another set of abuse. Not knowing what I'm going to do, but here's the thing. While I knew it was another set of abuse, I didn't know different. So for me, okay, he took it up another level, but it's okay. I'm used to this. So I got pregnant the first month I came to America, and they put me to work at, if you lived in New York City, you'll know the drugstores, Duane Reade. I worked at a Duane Reade, and I was working as I was pregnant, but all I had to do was go to work, come home, no friends. I'm not allowed to have friends. You think that's bad? I'm not even allowed to shave my legs. I'm not allowed to do my eyebrows or do anything with my hair. It was so bad. And I don't think it has anything to do with you're not allowed to shave your legs because, oh, who are you shaving your legs for? It was more of a control thing, that I have full control over you, even your personal body. I have control over. So many days, I would sit at the train station and I would look at the trains go by, and I would think about, maybe I'll jump in front of the 505 or the 506 or the 5. I keep thinking, which train would be the best train to jump in front of? And the only thing that kept me sane and not jumping in front of the trains was my little boy. I gave birth to this beautiful little boy. And it was the only thing that kept me going back there. I knew I had to go back there. Now, by this time, you must know what's going on with me psychologically. I am in a state of despair, not knowing it. My self-esteem is zero. I have no resiliency. I am disempowered. I have nothing. I have nothing, and I don't know what to do. And I'm not talking to anyone. I'm scared to talk to people. I'm scared to have friends, because I know, I get beaten up at home for stupidest thing. Imagine having a friend. So when I worked at the store, one of the things I do is, the one thing they couldn't take away was my personality of being bubbly and loving people. For some reason, I've had this love for people, and I love helping people, and that they couldn't take away. I think that was my God-given gift of loving people, and that's what helped me. Because as I worked at this drugstore, I used to help people with their makeup, and there was an executive from a bank that came in, and she said, "What are you doing working here? You have so much potential." And it was the first time anyone has poured belief in me. Can you believe that? And I thought, what potential? And she said, if you go get your GED, which I had my high school diploma in my country, it doesn't count here. She said, I will get you a job at the bank. And it was the first time, I wish I knew who she was. And I could thank her for who I am today, because that was the first thought, the first kind word someone had said to me. And I went, I sneaked every night. I would go and studied for my GED and say I have to work late at the bank, and I would go to be tutored, and finally I got my GED. Then I lied again and I went to computer school because I said, oh, I have to work late, and I lied, and I kept going and learning and growing because that one person believed in me. Now, I worked at the bank, and the one thing I am with another caliber of people, right? I'm at the bank, I'm with professionals, and I'm an observer, and I'm looking at people, and I am seeing their resiliency, I'm seeing their confidence, I'm seeing how they look people in the eyes. And the first thing I realized was I I can't look people in the eye, because I grew up in a culture where you speak when you're spoken to. Um, you don't have any power. You don't look people in the eye. Remember what I said about male and female? We're separated, um, and especially men. And I'm terrified of men at this point. So I knew in order to move forward in life, I need to be able to look people in the eye, because I was at an interview, and there was a man from Trinidad, and I was sitting down, and he said to me, he was asking me a question. I was mumbling, and he said to me, and he young lady, look up. And I was startled, and I looked up, and he said, if you are going to get anywhere in America, you have to project, and you have to be able to look me in the eye. That's my second, someone pouring into me, my second time. And he made me realize that I've got to be able to look these people in the eye. So every day at the bank, what I would do is I tend to look down, but I would look up 1 second, 2 second, 3 second. And I grew my resiliency of looking people in the eye 1 second at a time. But I knew it had to be done. And within a year, it became a habit. You know, habits are formed when you intentionally set processes in place and you actually do it. And I did it every day and every day and every day. And within a year, I could freaking look you up and down and look you in the eye. And that was the most freeing thing. You would say, well, Sally, that's not a big deal. For me, that's a freaking big deal. I was able to look people in the eye, and there's power in that. In the American culture, now other places in the world, culturally, it's not acceptable. But in America, if you're going to get anywhere, you better be able to look people in the eye. I realized that. So that was my first. So now I got a little empowered. My resiliency is growing. And I thought, okay, there was a woman at the bank, and I started talking to her and became her friend. Meanwhile, back at the house, the abuse continued. Every single night, you know, my ex would come home, he'd be drunk, and the abuse just continued. Now my son's 4 years old, fast forward, he's 4 years old. And one night, his father came home. It was 3 a.m. I looked at the clock, and I knew from the way he was walking that, one, he was angry, and two, he was almost in a state of blackout. I knew he won't know what's happening, and when he's in that state, he's dangerous. And I pretended to be asleep, but he walked into the room, and all of a sudden, and it was raining again. Something about me and rain and thunder and lightning. And he blasted the music all of a sudden. So I jackknifed out of bed because it just startled me. And I stood up, and he said, come dance with me. No, it's 3 a.m. So he dragged me out of bed, and he's he's dragging me around the floor. And our son woke up. He's 4 years old. And he grabbed the remote control. Not yet. Our son woke up. And he's just watching all of this. And my ex, he did a twirl. And I was so angry. I was just, I think this was my breaking point, that I got so angry. I leaned back a little bit, and this was the first time I've ever done anything like this. And I shoved him so hard that he flew across the room into the dresser. And I knew I'm dead. I just knew I'm dead because I don't know what happened next. And I don't know how it happened, but I'm on the floor. He's sitting on top of me, he's strangling me. And our son jumped out of bed. He grabbed a remote control, and I can see him as I'm passing out, hitting his father on the shoulder with the remote control. And he is screaming, "Leave my mommy alone. Mommy, let's go. Let's call a cab." And as my son's saying these things, I'm realizing I'm so stuck. I'm not even allowed to drive. My son knew that. He's like, "Mom, let's call a cab. Let's go, Mom. We need to go. Leave my mommy alone." And this was the pivotal moment in my life. This was the pivotal moment, is that he let up one hand from my throat and he took his other hand and he backhanded that little boy. I can tell all my stories, but this one is the hardest to tell always. And I watched as my little boy flew across the room into the same dresser I had shoved him into. And the thing that broke my heart was he wasn't screaming or crying anymore. He was so used to this abuse that he was just laying there, just whimpering. He was just whimpering. And you can see the pain in his eyes. Okay, this part is always hard for me to tell. You can actually see the pain in his eyes. And I shove him, superhuman strength, shove him off of me, his father. And I ran over, and he's startled. He's never laid hand on it was always me, not on our son. And I rushed over him, and I picked him up, and I held him. And do you know that mama bear instinct that kicks up? I felt that for the first time. I didn't think I was capable of feeling that. But also, my heart was shattered. There was so much emotion going on. My heart was shattered in millions of pieces. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about me, poor Sally, and what she's going through. I looked at this little boy, and we had to have that awakening. Because that awakening just woke up my soul. And as I looked at him, I made a promise to the both of us. One, we're going to run away. And two, you don't ever have to take care of me or protect me. You're 4 years old. It's my job to protect you. I brought you in this world and I need to protect you. So I got to work and I started talking to this other lady I was talking to, and I continued to talk to her, and she encouraged me. And we planned out the whole thing. It took a couple of months, but we planned it out. Where I went and I got an apartment. That's a whole story by itself. It was traumatic doing that. But I moved to another. We lived in New York. I went to New Jersey. I found a gated community. I got an apartment. And the only thing left now was for me to execute. This was the hardest part. So I remember it was Mother's Day weekend. And that Monday, I said it was a bank holiday. I lied. And I put our clothes as he went to work. I took our clothes and I put in a laundry bag. And I told his parents we're going to the laundry, and we put it in the cart, in the laundry cart. And I told my son, we're going on an adventure. You can't tell anyone. And he was so excited. And we pushed a laundry cart down the road. My ex's mother gave me money to buy milk. I left the money on the bed. And I had met a lawyer at the bank. And he learned my story because he saw me trying to look people in the eye. And I went to coffee with him, and he learned about my story. And he said, I will represent you for free. And I left his card on the bed, and I went down the street, and I called a cab. And we got into the cab, and that was it. We left. And we went to our new apartment. It was so scary. It was just so scary. We went to the new apartment. It was the first time I've ever had my own place. I was free from anyone and any abuse. And we slept on the floor, but it was one of the scariest, but the most resilient time of my life. I don't know how to explain it. It was scary, but I felt strong. And there were so many, I felt nervous. I felt all the feels, so much emotions going through me. And We got up the next day, we went and we bought 2 spoons and 2 forks and 2 knives and a blanket, and that was it. Now, if I can tell you that's the end of it, but it isn't. But I want to say this. If you're listening to my story and you're hearing this, the thing that gave me courage in this part of my life was community and talking to people. I couldn't have done this had I not talked to that woman at work, had I not shared what I was going through. She sensed it. She would see redness on my face or my neck, and she would sense I was being abused, but she never asked. But once I shared, she's like, I can't believe it. I knew something was going on. So having that support system is so crucial, and it's so important. Whatever it is you're going through, just know. Talk to people, talk to professionals. You don't have to go through it by yourself. So, oh my gosh, so much happened within that time. But there's one story that stuck out to me. We actually got we went through the divorce. Actually got visitations, and he couldn't know where I lived. So we were at the train station doing the handoff of our son. And so I handed him off, and he was bringing him back to me that weekend. And again, I can tell as he's walking up the subway stairs and I'm looking at him, I know he was almost in a blackout state, dangerous state, completely drunk. I knew something bad was going to happen, and I can tell from my son's face. And he walked up, and this was about a year and a half later. And I had a friend I was seeing, just friends. And my son had told him. And he walked up there, and he came up to me, and he said, who is this person that you are seeing? And I said, and I shouldn't have said it, can't keep my mouth shut. We're not married anymore, and I'm not your wife. So he grabbed me by the throat, and he held me up against one of the pillar there, and he's strangling me, and that wasn't enough. The train's coming, and he pulled me to the edge of the platform, and I can see the lights coming through the tunnel. That's not the light you want to see at the end of the tunnel, trust me. This light is coming through the tunnel, and he went to the edge where the yellow, I don't know if you know the train station, there's a yellow marking where you can't cross. And he went to the edge, almost toe hanging over the edge, and he's holding me to his chest while I'm facing the train tracks. And he's like, if I can't have you, then no one else can have you. And he's holding me, and I'm shaking because I knew he's so drunk. If I even move, we're both going onto the train tracks. And I am just praying, ready to meet my maker as my life is flashing through my eyes. And I can hear my son again screaming in the background, please leave my mommy. You said if I tell you that you won't hurt her. And it was a Sunday. So there were people like, you can't do that to her. Leave her alone. I said, but this is my wife. And I must have passed out. I don't know what happened to this day. I must have passed out because I woke up and I'm lying on the platform and he's gone. And for the first time, I just went to the police station and I reported it. And he never got visitation again from our son. So all this to say that, one, community is so important. There's so much more to my story, but I want to share the important things and what has helped me as I move in this journey. The person who I am today is because of the people in my life. But not just that. I have to be accountable for my own growth. So I realized I needed to start reading. I needed to start studying people who's been there and done that. And I needed to figure out how not to live in this bondage in my mind and how to move forward with it. So I pulled an excerpt from my book that I want to share with you today. One of the ways that I was able to move forward and build resiliency, obviously that act of leaving was a stepping stone. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it was such a powerful stepping stone for me. It was my foundation of building my resiliency when I made that effort to run away. But I kept myself now, these days, and I learned valued center. When I say that, I develop values for myself that I live by. And those values are faith, And my faith values come from the first time I walked into a church. It wasn't strange to me because I've been talking to Jesus all of my life. So my faith is so strong. I live by faith. Friends. Friends and family is my next value. And fitness, of course, my fitness. Love my fitness. But I live an impact-driven life. My next value is impact because impact is important to me. I've gone through so much in life and there's so many people who need help out there. That's one of the purpose of this podcast. That however way I can pay it forward, I feel like I've been so blessed to be who I am today and to be able to rise up from those ashes into something beautiful that I feel I need to pass that on to people. You need to hear this. This is why I share my story. The next one is I learned from experience. I look back at things that I've gone through. When I'm going through something hard, I look back on the things I've come through and I'm like, I've been through all of that crap. And I came out the other end. I will come out of this too. So drawing from experience is so powerful. And knowing that, you know what, it's going to be okay. But where you put your source, where you draw your source of strength is important. For me, I draw it from my faith. I draw it from God. I don't have to do this on my own, and I'm so thankful. But you think about where you draw yours from. Everybody's different. You might not believe. It's you draw it from the universe, or you draw it from friends, or you draw it from family. I use all of that, but my main source is from God. So think about what that would look like for you. And I'll be proactive. I think being proactive is so important when you're going through something. Being proactive, formulate a plan. Do what needs to be done when you're going through something. Sometimes we get paralyzed. Talk to people and move forward from that paralyzed state. Your plan might be plan B. The universe and God might have a different plan for you. But plan. Be proactive and take action. And I talk about getting connected. Build a fortress around you of people who are going to be there for you. They're going to answer your phone calls. And it doesn't have to be 50 people. 2. Good enough. 2. Make every day meaningful. This is so important to me, is that I make every day meaningful. Give it a sense of accomplishment. Every day I wake up. What is my purpose today? What am I going to do today that's going to make an impact? Today I woke up, I was so happy. I'm coming to record. It's recording day. So I am going to give people a platform to share their stories of resilience today. Make an impact. It doesn't matter one small thing. Even if you smile at someone, you've made an impact. You don't know what that person is going through. And stay hopeful. Look, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, not the type of light I was talking about when I shared in my story, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. If you live in a scarcity mindset, then that takes you, it takes away your self-confidence, it takes away your self-esteem, and it also takes away from your mental space of helping other people. Live in an abundance mindset. Abundance is it's so freeing. When you live in an abundance mindset, you know what? It's going to happen. I just got to put it out there. I just got to talk to people about it. I know it's going to happen. Today, I'm going to live in an abundance mindset. It's so important. And most importantly, the last one, man, self-care is not selfish. It is not selfish. You got to take care of you, regardless of what you are going through. And it doesn't, no, for me, yeah, let's go get my nails done or my hair done. But self-care for me is waking up at 6 a.m., getting my workout in, getting my prayers in, getting my worship in, doing my meditation, and taking care of Sally the first 3 hours before I even talk to anyone. That's my daily self-care for me. I don't answer text or phone calls unless it's my family who, or somebody's calling and I know this is important. I don't even look at my phone before 9 o'clock. 6 to 9 is Sally time, self-care for me. So I want to thank you for listening to my story. I hope that it inspires you. But that was just a high level. If you want more details, you can find my book on Amazon, Triumph Over Failure and Fear. And listen to this. If I can do it, just know you can do it. And don't be afraid. Thank you.